me as a guest, specs, multiple GCs, and can we actually tender a BIM model? All this on today's episode, and let's get into it. Welcome to What the RFI. I'm Matt Brennan, and this is the podcast all about CA. Today, we're going back into the archives. And what I mean by that, I'm actually currently traveling through Europe right now. Something that's been on my bucket list for, like 22 years, 23 years. I am beyond excited, and I'm sure I'm having a great time as you're listening to this right now. So I thought it would be a great time to showcase a personal guest episode. I was actually a guest on a podcast called The Deliberate Words. Okay, this is a podcast that's hosted by David, Steve, and Tina from Conspectuous, and we had a great chat. It went really well, lots of good laughs and everything, and we're going to dive into it in a moment here. But before I do that, Conspectuous, it's really an all-in-one spec writing software. Okay, so you basically log into the software, and what makes this really unique versus the old ways of doing it through Microsoft Word and stuff is it just links everything together. If there's a certain spec section that's kind of outdated, you tie it together, and you're basically, when you publish that set of specs that go into that job that goes out to CA, it's always, all the cross references are right. You don't got missed up title blocks. You're not pulling up old references, maybe outdated products. And that's kind of the idea with the software, is it brings you into light. And it's been around for a long time. But yeah, what a phenomenal tool to use. And again, just to ensure, because one thing we keep on the podcast, we talk about drawings and CA and them not being right. Well, hold on. It takes two to tango here. Specifications need to be correct as well. And if you don't have good solid specs, the job can turn a different way. Like, you've heard me kind of say, I had one job that the drawings I felt were really solid, really clean. We used a brand new spec writer, and we didn't know what we were going to get. And we got some really weird RFIs, and it was all because of the specs. So having a good set of documents as far as your specifications go are key. And that's what Conspectuous basically, is involved. So basically check it out, check out the blog post with links and all that kind of stuff. But that's what we did. So like I said, I was featured as a guest on their podcast called Deliberate Words. And this is really how it went. So let's get into it.
Is it live or is it Memorex?
Now you're just dating yourself, Steve.
Remember those old commercials? The guys in the chair just gets blown back by the sound.
That's right. The old iconic image too, right?
Yep.
Good
old
old Dolby Atmos
speakers.
Yes, that's right. What was the brand for that, by the way?
I don't remember.
But we remember the branding behind it. We just don't remember who it was associated to.
So it was really effective, wasn't it?
Oh, it totally was. And the guy, he had his sunglasses. It was, you can just vision, put it back in your mind there, and just, yeah, clearly that was the experience.
Leather coat.
Yeah.
Long hair. That's right.
Yes, but the fact that none of us can remember the brand.
That's the problem.
Well, I know it was Memorex. It was Memorex audio tapes when we did things on tape.
Yeah, maybe that was it.
Yeah,
the good old. Yeah, now we're dating, and that's why it doesn't really exist, because that has come and gone.
What's really funny is it's great, because I was at a concert the other night and they were selling an audio cassette of their latest album. I was like, and they had vinyl next to it.
Yeah, I know vinyl. Vinyl's still alive.
Yeah, are we going to bring back 8-tracks?
Wouldn't be surprised. Well, I got an email the other day, it was the summer of the 90s, and actually it was in Wisconsin, and I'm very tempted, because it's all the bands I listened to in the 90s, got Nickelback and Theory of Dead Man, and the list went on, but it was all the high school, that's where mine was. I was born in 83, and I was into the 90s in music and the rock, and that's where everything is. Now it's all these guys are doing these retours of the 90s, and I'm seeing Our Lady Peace this Sunday. So haven't seen them since I was, like I said, when I was 17 to, early 20s.
You know what you get when you combine 50 Cent?
No.
Oh, crap. I just blew it.
You did, didn't you?
Nice try.
What you get when you combine 50 Cent with Nickelback?
Oh, you just said it. What do you got there, Steve?
45 cents.
Yeah, that's true.
Guys,
Yeah, that's simple
yeah.
math. Yeah.
You guys are talking about the wrong genre of music for me, I got to tell you.
What do you listen to? What's your fancy, Dave?
Big band from the 40s.
Oh yeah.
That and classical.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. There's one playlist. Like if I have to get work done, I go on my Apple account and it's called Classical Tronics, and it plays in that classical realm, but more of a new age in a sense. So it's just, I don't know. It's a variety of stuff. It's something that you might actually find. But yeah, if you want to get focused, sometimes it can be really good. Some amazing pieces, and you just run with it.
No, focus, I turn it all off.
No way.
Gotta have something in the background.
No.
Low in the background though. Low in the background.
All off.
Is that
I
when you're
usually
like trying to get through those specs? And, you got that
That's
deadline.
it.
Yeah. Silence.
Silence is golden.
It depends on the early days of the specs. It's light jazz in the back, instrumental in the background, and then when you get towards delivery and deadline, it's
Heavy metal.
You just crank it up. Yep. Totally.
Oh dear. Well, Steve, here we are rambling, and we haven't even introduced our guest today.
Yeah. Fellow podcaster, actually probably better than us.
Let's not go that far. Let's
We
be
will.
modest.
We'll go that far. We'll be modest. You're better than us.
Yeah.
So Matt Brennan with dang it.
Part 3.
Part 3, that's right.
Part 3, yeah.
Too many Matt Brennans in the world.
Yeah, I know. I know. There's only a few. You only have a good, you need to have only one.
Right. So Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Well, in high level, my name's Matt Brennan. I've been in this industry, this beautiful architectural industry, for the past 22 years. Seen and done it all. And when I say that, I started in residential housing, subdevelopments, eventually got into high rises and all that kind of stuff. Found myself into doing K to 12, all that institution side of things. That's really where my passion is. And I stayed in that sector for a long time. Early days, I actually did a little bit of reselling for Autodesk, given the industry where it was. Went through that process, got to work with some amazing architects, which kind of prompt me to where I landed my feet with Reno C. Negrin Architects. And, I really developed a lot. That's where I had my real passion. Those were the glory days. And and then, like I said, kind of going back into the architectural industry and then coming to this point, a company by the name Part3 approached me about 3.5 years ago. And what Part3 is, it's all about construction administration, but design for architects. You got the Procores of the world, which is great for the GCs. Happy to use that if I was a GC. But as architects, we've been left in the dust, and CA really hasn't changed much over the years, other than going from physical shop drawings to faxing them to emailing them. And now it's kind of stalled for the last, 15 years. And, can we do better? And that's where Part3 came into my life. And at that point, I used it, for 2 years, and I was like, wow, this has been a solution in the industry we've been screaming for. And through the opportunity came up and actually joined the company. So I've had multiple lives in this, these last, 2 decades with it. And just fun, audio video has been on the side, of course. And, and of course, podcasting since, September is a new game for me as well, but really enjoying it. So that's it in a nutshell, really.
Well, in a nutshell, that's awesome. Tell us the name of your podcast so people can listen to it.
Yeah. So it's called What the RFI. And, it tags on to the, that kind of fun aspect to it, but it's all about construction administration from the lens of an architect, from a project coordinator, consultant perspective. Again, lots of amazing architectural podcasts out there talking about design, but even in today, like in your schooling, in, just general forums or anything, is just no one talks about CA. But yet, if you have that passion for it, there's so many stories that go with it. You can sit down, have a drink, and the stories come alive between everyone. Everyone's had their different experiences, different frustrations, but the core elements are there about CA and what they are. And that's what it's about. Each week I post Monday morning, and it's all about, like I said, it's all about CA. I do guest interviews as well, and definitely that's kind of a big roadmap item for 25.
Well, every week you're ambitious to be able to get that to get that podcast done weekly. So I want to just back up. Part 3, there's a connection, right? There's a reason for the name. So tell us what you think the reason is.
For the Part 3? Well,
Yes.
when I was first introduced to Part 3, I thought it was a BC building code. Like, because in our, like, being out of Vancouver, BC, we have our building code. Part 3 is all about the commercial side. So if you're designing a school, you're going to design your school around the Part 3 of the building code. So, of course, when we were introduced to the company, and that was the first question I personally asked, was what is, and I've had, clients ask the same thing. Part 3 was established out of Ontario, Canada. And Part 3 out of Ontario represents CA. Part 2 is bids and tenders, and Part 1 is design. So that's where the name came about, was that general section of CA, and hence Part 3.
So we have a connection to specifications too because of Part 3, which is essentially all the field execution work, right? Which fits right into CA.
That's right, absolutely, and it is key. Like it's like, again, Part 3 is kind of more on the again from it's on the CA side, and that's where, like, I've always enjoyed working with specs, always did, but we brought it early on in the stage. But the reality is it still comes into CA, from that early days of, I would actually probably get our specs moving after we've completed a building permit package. That's when we'd launch our specs, we'd do it, finalize it up to your tender point, modify it during tender, that process. Once that tender was closed, then your specs were locked into it. And then hopefully you got it all right, because if you didn't do anything right, that's where the cracks would form, and that's where the extras would come in on those schools.
Yeah. Okay, so we've said CA multiple times, but we haven't said anything about what CA means.
I know, and so that's a downfall of my own self. But CA is construction administration. Contract administration is another term, but technically construction administration, CA.
So the design side of managing construction, primarily.
Yeah, basically the moment, what is, when I have to explain it to, when I go out with my partner and she's introduced me to friends, and what do you do? And it's very simple. The way I explain it is basically construction administration is the moment the contractor starts taking those blueprints and starts building it, there's a whole bunch of paperwork that comes through it. And that phase is called construction administration. And I think that's probably the best way to explain it, but I'm open to hearing a different way.
I think you have a kindred spirit here on the call with us today.
I've always explained it as, because I stumbled into specifications through construction administration.
Right.
So I worked for a contractor, and then I became a CA for an architect. And when people ask me what I do, I was like, basically I take the design documents, the specifications, and the prints, and make sure that it gets built according to that. Or if it can't, answer the questions as they come up to make sure it gets as close to that design as possible.
And you're right. And that's, like, at the end of the day, like, the whole point of the construction administration, the CA phase, and the architect's role is all through this design phase. You've been designing, the way I like to explain is, you've been designing this BMW, right? You've got this beautiful car, you've designed it, you've got this beautiful project, this beautiful building. The role of the architect, the CRP, is to basically ensure that the contractor is building as per what you've designed and specified. And that's why specs and drawings are so key. And they both have to match. They both got to coordinate. They both got to talk to each other. Because at the end of the project, you want to basically, hold up that rendering and then drop it and go, did we do what we told the client we're going to do? Did we give them the BMW, or did we give them the Honda Civic, right? And that's where your budget constraints, through that process during that CA, where things may get cut, maybe there's value engineering, anything like that. But that's your job, is to ensure that you're delivering that product and following those guidelines. So being intimate with your drawings and specs definitely goes a long way.
Yeah. I thoroughly enjoyed CA because the interaction you had with this contractor and the architect,
100%.
and finding the right ways to do things. Because as an architect, we think we have the right answer, but the person who's done it for all of their life might have a better answer to get
Oh,
you the same
100%.
result. And it's
like
great
even
talking to them.
like what we find too, like it's like we did one little project. One of the last projects I was heavily involved in before I left and joined the Part3 team was we did these 6 daycares. Now this daycare design was the same thing, right? It was a province they were launching. They needed daycares throughout the, through a certain city and everything, certain district. And the way that we put the contract is we designed one building, other than some buildings may have a little bit of an extension on one side of the wing, right? It was kind of like a U shape, but it was going to 6 different sites. And because it was 6 different sites, they ended up deciding that let's tender it 6 different ways. Like let's tender it. So you had, in the end, I think there was 4 GCs, 4 separate GCs building this. And of course, when it came to the, the building in the CA phase, everyone had different questions. They were picking up different parts of the specs, different questions. One built it with very minimal, requests for information, RFIs and stuff like that. But then some were asking a huge amount of questions. It was actually easier to draw a school, do a CA on a school than these daycares, because it just depends on who it is. And we've even seen that with details like a parapet detail, where we've issued this parapet detail for years, right? It's the same details, pretty straightforward. And we had one contractor come to us later, when they were building it, saying, we want an extra. Okay, please clarify. Well, you got your angle and your steel deck coming in, so that's about a 1/4 inch. And we want some, strapping at the top to, basically when we put in our final piece of backing plywood, and then they do the membrane and everything. And it was one of those little details. You're like, are you serious? You just really want to strip? Oh yeah. And they priced it out. I think it was like a $15,000 extra. So of course, you don't just stop there. You go back and look through the drawings, and yeah, okay, fair enough. I see the problem. You go measure it up, and then in the end, it worked out to be about 3 pieces of 3 sheets of plywood in that respect. But interesting that you just give that detail to most builders, most contractors, and something simple like that. They don't, they just want to get the job done. But then you've got these organizations that like to pick that stuff apart, and it all ranges. But again, same detail. You think it's right. You've had it right on many other jobs, and now it's coming up to being challenged, basically, of how you can do it. And then you just take that stuff with, you take that on a serious note. You can, tell them to screw off, or you can say, all right, fair enough, I'm going to be better going forward. And then from there, from that particular incident, all our details had this little 1/4 inch strip at the top to ensure that we didn't get stung with an extra.
Do you think that's the cause that documents have gone from 6 sheets to 1,000 sheets?
Yes, because like working on a lot of old schools, like we did one out in Langley, BC, and it was built in multi-phases, and it was like in the 1950 something. It was kind of the first wing, and then they did another one in 1960, and then another edition in 1977 and stuff like that. So we took all these drawings, and it was like exactly like that, Steve, where the first original sets were 10 pages, and the next set was 20 pages, and then when we issued our drawings, they were like a brand new middle school. It's at least 130 sheets, right? Like every interior elevation's documented, like even if it's just like a quarter panel of a wall, right? Everything is physically documented, because we just don't want to deal with, that wasn't in contract or something. We've included 3D isometrics now to ensure that, yes, you can see that material is returning. Yes, we didn't call out that one tiny little cove in the plan.
Well, wait a minute. Why don't we just issue the models? Wouldn't that solve everything? I mean, isn't that the BIM promise?
Yeah, I see that going. I know I've had my discussions with contractors on this one too there, Dave. And I think it's just a recipe for disaster, because when you give a simple, like say if we, whether it was a simple little shed or like an actual project, right? The reality is, and today's, multi-users, you got, juniors, you got seniors, and I don't think it doesn't matter whoever's doing it. But the reality is, if we drew, say, a custom millwork countertop, okay, and you didn't tag that material, you put as generic material. Well, you as the architect, you wanted that to be granite or, marble or whatever. Well, how am I supposed to know? The model just shows as generic. Is the whole thing model? Like, even if you took the due diligence and modeled every single thing, how many hinges? And I guess that's where specs would come in. But it would be a nightmare at no end. I think it would be a way to pick away at every unique detail to no end, right? You know, it would just, I think it would just create a bunch of extras if that was the only thing you're issuing.
Good
You know, what's
point.
interesting. What's interesting about that is there's been a lot of talk lately about digital twins. I just was at a
Yes.
talk the other night about digital twins, and what struck me as interesting is, can you really have a digital twin? And for those that may not be familiar with it, it's basically a virtual representation of what was built
Mm-hmm.
in a reality. Can you really have a digital twin where you don't have the specification data, the information in the model?
It's tough. Like let's take like a door, right?
Mm-hmm.
A door is not just a door, right? Like
Oh no.
we know it's a slab, right? We know that, you know, is it hollow? Is it, you know, is it fire rated? All those details. And let's just get to the door hardware. Like, why do we have door hardware consultants?
Mm-hmm.
The reality, it's a complicated thing because everything ties into the code and everything. So are you going to note that on drawings? No, right? Same thing like ULC ratings. Like you could at least call up a ULC. Like we had a page dedicated to certain ULC ratings. Like in order to build this fire rated wall, you had to follow the ULC rating, which, you know, spacing for the, you know, the screws, the nails or whatever had to be at these patterns. Otherwise it didn't qualify to meet that ULC rating. And it's the same thing with, like I said, door hardware. Like all those nuts and bolts, like you're not calling up individual screws on plans. That would be insane. Your drawings would, even though you think your drawings would be perfect, I'm sure the contractor would find something to pick away at and go, you didn't include the nails on this sheet. Oh my goodness. Like we've seen that with tags, right? Like with wall tags.
Yeah.
Where we had the whole plan all wall tagged up, and one wall we didn't tag on the plan, and it was an extra layer of furring, right? Because we had all these bump outs and conduits and steel, so we had to run a whole brand new up. But it was clear visually, and it was clear on the sections, like the, you know, the 10 different sections, and then the blow up of those sections. It was clear and it was tagged there, but because we didn't tag on the plan, they wanted an extra for that wall, and that was where. Do the whole mountain molehill kind of thing. Where do you put your foot down? Where do you, you know, set the precedent going forward? That was one of those scenarios that we said straight up, like, no, we're not allowing that as an extra. 100%.
Yeah, but that's an interesting. I just can't help but wrap my mind around. You may have a visual representation of what your building is, but you don't know what your building is.
Yeah,
with the digital.
Yeah, exactly. Like, see if
Yeah, and you may not have the data to support it in the model, which I think is where you were going. And we've seen examples of that, where we actually had an architect use a curtain wall family in the model to represent a brick and block cavity wall. Now, why would you do that? I have no idea, other than they just didn't change the data to have it match what they actually drew.
And you're right. And that's kind of where sometimes that's where technology limitations stop you. And like, again, that, with Revit in the past, you know, and it's always evolving and, you know, it's still being improved, thankfully. But yeah, you're right. That makes a good point, Dave, because we would use the curtain wall tool to make a railing sometimes if we had a crazy feature. Like we would do a workaround. Hey, we want this. This is what we're trying to do from the vision for it. Well, Revit's limiting us. We can't do it. How do we do it? And well, hey, we figure, you know, people have done those workaround, those little cheats and everything with Revit. Well, going back to the digital model and tendering it, is this a curtain wall or is this a railing? What is it? You know, and that's where the gray becomes it. And but digital twins, it's an interesting thing. Like it's a great tool for a facility manager. But it depends on who's managing and controlling that data. Because I've seen that where it's always gone through one individual. And if they shut down shop, then the whole thing's lost. I think architects should be controlling that data going forward. And it becomes an extra value proposition that they can resell back to their clients and maintain those relationships, right? So like for a good example is like, rather than just putting your mechanical units all throughout there, give them QR codes to the maintenance manual, because no one's going to walk around with a book that's you know thousands of pages thick. It's not convenient, but what they do have is a phone in their pocket. So put all that stuff in the digital cloud. Everyone has Wi-Fi and internet. Put QR codes on the equipment in there. How do I operate this operable wall? Put a little QR code with your little logo or whatever, the owner's logo. snap, that's how you operate it and away you go. And even too, like on big walls, like say, for example, hey, we're going to open up this wall or we're going to install something. What's behind that wall? Well, before they boarded, someone goes there and takes a photo of every single wall, puts that in their architectural digital model. And then basically they can, as the architect, they can just walk up, hold their phone. Oh yeah, there's this pipe, this pipe, this pipe, this beam, this, cross brace. It's a little bit more complicated. We got to figure out something different. And I think that's where architects can really go from a facility management side and extend that extra side of business as a contract with their owner and maintain it and continue and be that architectural record to do those changes.
That's a great idea. And, the STI a while ago, I don't know, specified technologies, they do fire stopping.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Sealants. A few years ago, I was with another firm at the time, but they had us up there. They were experimenting with QR codes.
Okay.
And fire stop assemblies. And what they would do is they would take a picture of the assembly. It would print out a QR code. They'd stick it next to the assembly. And then it had all the data, who installed it, when it was installed, what was installed, so that when they had to do their fire stop inspections, and this was for hospitals, because they had to do them annually or whenever the authorizing agency came through. But they could just QR code them and give them all the data right there. And they had a map of the entire hospital, showed them where everything was.
Exactly. And like, to me, that's what digital twin should be, right? Like it's because like I went to one presentation, get a real clear understanding. And at the end, it's like, well, if you want to add more chairs and all that. And I'm like, well, people aren't going to do that, right? You're not going to go spend, and it was all these extra consultant fees and stuff. But like that data, that's key, right? When you need to go back in time and it's years, what is the easiest way to grab that, right? And that, like, again, all about CA and CA logs. Again, having the logs intact is so critical to ensure that things are being followed. Data is king, as you know. It's not finger pointing, it's just called accountability, who did what and everything. And that's just a prime example of why it matters.
So how is it, Matt, that Part 3 is helping the architects manage all of the CA?
So the common theme, and this is where like CA really hasn't changed over the years, is we basically naturally just gravitated to the tools we had at our disposal, right? So we had Outlook, we had Microsoft Word, and we had Excel. So what would be the easiest way to track when an RFA came in? What would you do? You would kind of notate it, maybe try your server in that sense, but you would naturally just kind of log into Excel. So the problems with Excel in that sense and going that method is the reality is you're manually inputting it. You're a human, you're going to make mistakes, right? So maybe you don't know, or if you go away on holidays and someone else jumps into and try and maintain that, that's one thing. It's not a standardized in the office. Everyone becomes their own little silos and they start doing their own little logging and their tracking in that way. So that's kind of the problem, what we've kind of developed and just as the norm, right? So where Part 3 comes into the table here is it automates that whole entire process. Whereas a contractor uploads issues a new RFI or shop drawing and everything, it comes into the Part 3 database. Again, it's an all-in-one CA application designed by architects for architects, and it immediately notifies the right people that, hey, there's a shop drawing that needs to be reviewed. And again, the days of the old ways where I would get that shop drawing, come into my office, right? Maybe the contractor CC'd the right electrical and mechanical. If this was like a rooftop unit, great. I would physically log it, note that so-and-so got it, then make sure that, they're reviewing it. Then mechanical sends back their review of this shop drawing. Okay, I've got some pages. Electrical eventually, I send it to electrical and then he sends it back. Oh, by the way, he marked up the original one. The contractor said, oh my goodness, now I got to combine 3 shop drawings together into one, or I can just give the contractor from a 50-page shop drawing to times 3, now 150 pages, and the headaches. And this is where errors really start to happen because electrical marked on page 49 in the tiniest little red note, it's supposed to be a 3-phase versus a single phase or something like that. So where Part 3 comes into that aspect is rather than doing that archaic process, we're basically coming around the table right now, marking up the shop drawing in real time in one platform that's managing it. And then it's all being communicated in one entity, logging it at the same time, and then pushing it back to the contractor. And then when you introduce the world of where the contractors in Procore, that's a whole nother world in a sense where you're inundated from all his stuff. And the contractor's taking the right approach, right? If I was a GC, I would use Procore in a heartbeat because it manages all that from their end of the world.
Right, absolutely.
It totally is, right? And rightfully so. It's a great tool for that, right? It manages their subs, it manages their own budgets and everything, but it inundates the architects with emails of the painter opened up the spec. I don't care. I don't need an email. I have clients creating separate email accounts just to house these Procore emails. And that's kind of the beauty with Part3 and Procore is they have that partnership relationship, and the two connect together. So again, the contractor has his data and the architect now controls his data. And a good example is like RFI closeouts. RFI comes in, it logs it. When you return that RFI, it logs it. And then when it gets closed. So the example, like a personal example, I'd be at my site meetings with some of these GCs and they would be like, Matt, when are we going to get a, RFI 30? It's been with you for 3-4 months now. Actually pull up Procore. It's in your court because I can see my data shows that I returned it the same day. It was in and out in the same day. Oh, you're right. Shoot, my bad. And oh, by the way, when you're closing that RFI 30, can you close the 10 others that are still in your court? They haven't been closed. And that's where having data at your fingertips is key. And it even goes on beyond that too, Dave, because it talks about like it because everything's data driven, I can pull up dashboard data and find out who is the slow consultant not responding to stuff, right? Is it that mechanical? Is it electrical? Is it us as the architect? And when a delay claim comes, I need that proof. I need to know where things are slipping through the cracks. And that's where it shows you. And with those like leaderboards, whether you show them or not to your team, it's an amazing tool because it actually changes human behavior. I've seen consultants go from really bad consultants to amazing consultants because they didn't want to be that guy being last on the list to return anything. They didn't want to be 15 days on an average response time for RFIs or shop drawings. And in a nutshell, it's a data management tool that's basically streamlining it, using AI to help review shop drawings, and then just providing that accountability. And the best part is you don't have to touch Outlook ever again. You can actually work through the platform. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what it is.
Dave, can we get part 3? No email sounds good to me.
Well, exactly. And that is the ugly trend. Like this was supposed to be a tool that was going to save us. Like, oh my goodness, we're going from the days of mail to, fax. Well, that was a new thing of doing things. And then email. It was send an email. Well, how many nonsense emails do you get in a day? Like it's just open up the door to inundate our inbox. And like when I was, inundated with CA and before the Part 3 days, like, yeah, it'd be 150 emails a day, 100 to 150. And I would say 20% were non-action items, meaning that I could go in, read, move to the next. So I didn't have to do anything. But a good portion of these emails were, shoot, I have to file this. I have to log this. I have to do something with this email. And maybe it's even just logging it, but either way, when you start looking at all those tasks that you're doing, 5 minutes, bam, at the end of the day, where did my time go? Well, I was a professional emailer. You certainly were. That's all you did today.
Yeah. And as the example, I looked at my email list at noon today because I hadn't touched it all day. There were over 150 sitting there waiting for me, and that was only 4 hours.
And yeah, and that's the reality of the architect. Even again, having your email on the side of your pocket, like that helps. It's nice that you can get to some of those quick and efficiently. But I think it's at the end of the day is how can we do it differently? Again, email is not going to leave, right? We get that. It's a form of communication. It's good, and it ties into that. But how can we do it better, right? Why, again, like going back to the days of CA, like you get this RFI, you get the email, you do it, you send it to your people, like you're doing all these actions. Can I just basically get into one place and hit return and be done? That's kind of what the end of it, like I said, that's what made me so efficient and like why I even believe in Part 3, because like at my last firm as an associate there, and I went from 3 to 15 jobs with this software. So like right away, it was when the opportunity came up, I certainly want to be part of this because I believe it's a tool. I believe when Revit came to my, doorstep, when Autodesk just acquired it, I looked at it and went, this is the future. Like, this makes so much sense than drawing stupid, dumb, detailed lines. That line can be anything, right? It could be wiring, it could be a wall, it could be a door. There's no intelligence to it. So when Revit came to the table, it just made sense. You walked away with this balsa wall model within a few hours. The client makes changes. You'd move the wall. Everything would update in a parametric way. It just made sense. And that's kind of where, like I said, that's where I see part 3. I call it the new Revit of CA because it's a new way of doing it in that respect.
So that's awesome.
Man.
So go ahead, Steve.
Oh, no, go. You go.
I know. Because you've mentioned BC a number of times today, British Columbia. For anybody else that might not know, right? So obviously Canadian. Yes. And just curious, what are your favorite things about Canada? We're going to take a little bit of a sidestep here because
I was gonna
a lot
say,
of our audience is US based, and BC, I fell in love with it when I visited Kelowna. It was awesome.
Yes. Kelowna is a very beautiful place. And it's only about 3 hours from where I am. So I kind of bring in kind of some context, the whole Great White North, basically. Yeah. So I'm on the far west side, just outside of Vancouver, which is basically once you hit Vancouver, you're at the water. That's as far as we can go. If we go south, we're going to hit Seattle, Portland, Oregon, California, etc. Right. So that's on my kind of spectrum with it. So while I'm actually in Harrison Hot Springs, which is kind of it's a touristy town in a sense, but we've got natural hot springs. We've just it's right to my right here. I got this beautiful lake of it. It's incredible. It's a great place to be. And yeah, like I said, I'll get into the stuff that I love to do here in a second, but BC is just so beautiful. You've got your mountain ranges, right? You've got, it's a lot of natural rainforest. So again, for example, so being in the lower mainland, if I start driving north up to Prince George, you're going to go through 3 different climates and you'll go into that really hillside and then eventually get to the dense forest once you get up to Prince, into Quesnel Williams Lake, right? Timber Kings, the guys that build the cabins, that's where they're based out of. But if rather than going north, I go, east, well, next thing you're going through the Okanagan Valley, which is like a desert, right? And, you've got that natural landscape. And then again, another few-hour drive, you're in the Kootenays. And again, just that wild wilderness. It's all over the map. It's beautiful. It's incredible. And if we kind of go along the border between BC and Alberta, that's where we got the Rockies, right? So that's where you got Banff. Everyone loves Banff. It's a very touristy town. We got Jasper, which unfortunately went through the big wildfires last year, and a good portion of the town just caught. They had no chance. It just happened too quick. And even Canmore, where the Last of Us was filmed. I love Canmore. It's a cool little mountain town, kind of like a Montana, but in Canada. And then, like I said, then you kind of fly over everything else. And eventually, you're going to have Manitoba, and eventually you're going to have Ontario, the big, center of it, and Quebec, and then to the PAI and that. So I want to go to the Far East at some point, check out those and traveling, my life and everything. But personally, I've been across the country. Yeah, I'm staying. I want to stay in BC. To me, it's if you're an outdoors person, this is the place to be. You've got your lakes. There's thousands of lakes around you within, minutes to a couple hours of driving. I do a lot of, recently I got back into overlanding, off-roading. So I bought a brand new Bronco and everything. And we've been just having a blast with it. We've been doing a lot of the Forest Service roads, the FSR roads, where we're, it's just miles and miles of, it's charted based on the logging industry, but some amazing wicked hidden gems for that. And there's apps out there that kind of even prompt you and give it to you. One of them's called OnX and everything. It's all about anyone who wants to go off-roading and check out these cool hidden gems, go there and you kind of see it. So I applied to them with the mount that we're starting to do. I applied to be a trail guide for them, and we got accepted. So now I map for them and we get free swag, and it's all fun, right? But what I like about it is it just encourages me to be like, I haven't been here. Let me just go here. Let's go explore. And hey, we know there's some natural hot springs up at here. Let's go take a look and let's go explore it and bring the bathing suit, bring the camping gear. And yeah, like I said, if you're outdoorsy, it's a playground on its own. And like, you look at the big map of like just British Columbia by itself, and it's like, I've only been up to Prince George, and there's still another province up there. Like, I mean, there's still half of it left to explore. And the deeper you go, the more wildlife, everything. It's incredible. It is a really beautiful place. So very grateful, born and raised here.
So when you're out doing your trail mapping,
Yeah.
do you camp? Do you spend the night sometimes and just enjoy
Yeah,
it?
100%. Yeah, you got to. And we like,
That
even on
sounds
the tailgate, Steve, we've got a little drop down table, which is awesome because like, you basically, wherever you want to have lunch, just drop the tailgate back. You pull up this little table and boom, and then just put your Coleman on there or your heater, your cooker or whatever, and
Mhm.
and away you go. So
And the
yeah,
best part is there's no one else around, right?
there's nobody around. So if you're doing a big trip, plan some like provincial parks or something like that, because it's nice to have I'm okay to go for a few days without a shower, but I like my showers. So
Oh, yeah. Most of us do.
that's the only thing.
Your friends probably like your showers too after a couple of days. So have you found a place to get your Broncos stuck?
We haven't got stuck yet. I don't want to curse it, but definitely, yeah, there's a couple of big outdoor adventure shows coming to like Vancouver Place and stuff. So I'm definitely going there with a shopping list, like get into the radios and get into, and like, again, just tow recovery. Like there's no winch on it right now, but those are things to start looking into. Cause yeah, if you get stuck, like sometimes we've gone and we haven't seen a single soul. So if that's the case, you just don't want to be out there. So if anything, do your due diligence, plan your routes, make sure you advise, two different separate people and where you're going, and make sure you tell them when you get back and all those things of just, do your due diligence, plan, be safe. And yeah, just don't take any risks.
It's kind of like backpacking in a way. You do the exact same thing, except you're in a car.
Yeah, exactly.
Off-road vehicle. Sorry, let me be more specific.
It almost sounds like, hey, we have roads here in New Jersey, but you get in the back Pine Barrens and you have to wonder, will I ever see another person? So I can imagine you get out on a trail like that. Yeah, you have to be especially careful.
Well, yeah. And like, again, wildlife and everything, like we've got another trip planned kind of early June up to Bella Coola. So basically, again, looking at a map, you're going to go up to Williams Lake, which again, everyone kind of sees and they drive through, but it's a whole nother rainforest on its own to basically going west of that. And that's where, again, grizzlies and everything. So we're very excited, but at the same time, doing your due diligence, planning your routes and seeing, and again, there's a ton of little off roads. There's one waterfall. Apparently it's the tallest in Canada, I've been told about. So I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but we've got that on the list to basically explore. And then when we get to Bella Coola, it's such a cool town. We've got a ferry book that's going to take us through the channel, through all the different micro islands. And it's a 10-hour trip to get to Vancouver Island, which again, that's an own beautiful place too. So like if anyone's on the fence, if they've never been, yeah, definitely got to check it out. And you can't check it out on a weekend. Like, every year I'm going on different vacations, and even weekend warriors still doing that kind of stuff. It's tough.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome hearing your stories about it. And like I said, when I fell in love with Kelowna, I can just imagine everything else is probably as beautiful or more so.
Oh yeah, and Kelowna, yeah, that's kind of like a California, but it's one that sees all the seasons, right? You get the beautiful fall, you get the big dumps of snow, and then when you get the summer, like it's incredible because of it's like its own beach town, right? And it's a fun place. Been there many times. I did a lot of schools up there. A lot of the school districts that I worked with there was fantastic and great bunch of people, and it's all about relationships when you do these road trips, because you can't, yes, you can do it in and out one day, but you're exhausted, spend the night, take that client out for a steak dinner or something, build those relationships, as it just goes the extra mile, right? In terms of the industry, right? It goes with anything in life.
Hey, you have a built-in benefit for negotiating with contractors. You just take them outdoors and go sit at a restaurant. I mean, anywhere in BC.
Totally.
How could anybody be mad? Look at the scenery. Look at the weather. Look at it's great. It's awesome.
Exactly. 100%. Yeah. And you mentioned contractors. We did one job where, we were up in Kamloops. So different than Kelowna. I would go to Kelowna versus Kamloops. But anyways, we were doing a job with them and it was great. And afterwards, like, what, you guys are going to be in the town because they were flying in from Alberta and all in Calgary and everything like that. And they stayed the night. We were staying the night. It's like, well, what do you want to do? So we ended up going to the casino to one of those steak places there, and we grabbed a few tomahawk steaks, which I've never done before. And what a riot we had after that. And again, it's all about relationships, right? And that's if you can do that kind of stuff and enjoy it, it goes a long way.
Yeah, it sure does, because it's all about the people, building the relationships.
And that ties into like the projects too on its own, because if you can do that and work and communicate and work together, it goes a lot better, right? It is a team environment. You're gonna scratch my back, vice versa. You're gonna find faults on my drawings, but I'm gonna find faults on site that you guys missed something. How can we work together, right? It doesn't have to be us versus the contractor relationship. If you work together, at the end of the day, you really do come together and create a big product. Because when you do wrap that project up, you do want to, bring that bottle of champagne and crack it open and have a great moment. Look what we did. We stuck to the drawings. We did all the attention to detail, and look what we have. This is incredible. Well done, team. You don't want to go into that point where you guys are fighting and everything, and it's just not fun. It's just not the same thing. Right?
Yeah, that makes CA miserable.
And you'd like to be able to finish the job and say, hey, let's do another one together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we've had those contractors and too, like when, there's all these pre-qualifications as well for a lot of jobs, like school districts will do a pre-qualifications, not just for, architects, but they also do it for contractors. And you're right. That's, it does play a role into, would you work with this contractor again? Yes or no? And just, you speak professionally about everyone, of course, but yeah, no, there's some contractors that school districts will not work with because of lawsuits or whatever, just the way they handled the business, right? And it's unfortunate that you've been locked out. And word travels fast. The architectural industry is small, right? It's you don't talk negative about anyone, because at the end of the day, you might be working with them next or rejoining with them, a few years later, right? It's such a small industry, 100%. And the specs, I'm assuming, it's the same thing, right? So
it is
even smaller.
So Matt, we're almost at our time here, at least our planned time.
Well,
and
let me interject something before you go there, because
all right,
Matt,
go ahead,
Matt. Let's have you back on again.
Let's do it,
because we're gonna wrap this up here in a few minutes, but. This is a great conversation, and I'm looking at my notes from when we talked earlier, and there's like 4 or 5 items that we didn't even touch on that I would love to touch on with you later. So let's continue this discussion, and maybe if you want, we can overlap. We can do it. We can ask some of your questions on your podcast, then you come back to ours, and we'll figure that out.
Absolutely, yeah, we could definitely. That would be a lot of fun to prepare, and because that's the thing with drawings and specs. Oh, there's so many conversations you can have about that from your experiences, stories. Again, how can we be better going forward, and how can we, minimize the errors on site and the extras, right? And come up with that BMW.
How I can make you lose money as a specifier, and how you can make me lose money as an architect,
That's right. That's a topic on its own. Lots of ways.
Yep. Anyway, sorry, Dave. I just wanted to make sure that Matt was coming back.
Well, now that you've grabbed the microphone, Steve, maybe you need to take this home.
All right. I think, Matt, we're going to ask you, because of the podcast name, in 5 words or less, how can you improve?
Words are important.
In 5 words or less.
Fewer.
Okay.
Fewer. Okay. So not 5 words. Maybe 4. 3 would be desirable by the sounds of it.
So 5 words or fewer. Go ahead, Steve.
In fewer or less than 5 words, How can the industry improve CA? Dave's head is spinning in circles right now.
Yeah, my head's spinning too. That's a loaded question. Clearly, we can't use 5 words. We've established the ground rules, so it has to be 4 words or less.
No, you could use 5.
We can use 5.
5 words or fewer.
I think if I had to kind of narrow down, and this can go so many ways, and maybe I can explain, but communication is key, right? And that goes with everything. That ties back to the early days of the drawings. It ties into the way you communicate on site, your mannerism when you're running a site meeting. Communication is key, and it's
3 words. You got
Very
it.
good. Very good. Very good. Actually, I think that those 3 words can go with just about everything in life.
yes. Oh, 100%. It is. It's your legacy, right? What you're doing. At the end of the day, when you're hanging up your coat, your hat at that moment, it's what did you leave behind? What was the thumbprints that you left? And both professionally, of course, but personally too.
And to drive it home, you could use 3 words: communication, communication, communication.
100%.
You've got 5. You might as well go with 2 more.
Yeah,
I'll stop at 3.
Yeah.
Everybody will just get tired of hearing me if I keep going.
But yeah, no, thank you so much. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here and chat. And like that went like that, it went quick and like, absolutely. Let's do it again. There's the whole other segment of, like I said, specs, drawings, all the other topics that we can definitely go in and dive into. And again, just leave that mentorship of how people can be better.
Absolutely. Matt, a pleasure to have you join us today. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
And awesome insights. And I loved hearing the stories about your mapping trail. So something different for our listeners.
100%. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Keep exploring. Life is short, and you one shot it. Make it beautiful. So, what did you think? Did anything stand out? Learn anything? Specs, kind of a bit about me and all that. I personally want to thank David, Steve, and Tina for just, again, organizing this, for inviting me on this show. And I definitely can't wait to be back on their show, right? And hopefully it'll be live in person next time. We had a whole bunch of talking points that we didn't quite get to go through. So I know we're going to definitely get together again. I've known David for a few years here. Same with Steve. I've attended both classes from them at CSI events. Fantastic topics, creates lots of discussion, engaging. Steve actually did this kind of design build Lego session, and it's sticking with me for life. It was such a great session, and it just brought you a different perspective to way IPD versus CM versus fixed tender bid. It was a really cool session, and it was all feature owned Lego, something we can all relate to. But be sure to check out their website. Check out the Deliberate podcast, Deliberate Words podcast. They do it kind of on a monthly basis and everything. They bring on guests and got a lot of great insights. So that's it. Hope you picked up something. You enjoyed it. And until next time, architects, keep designing, and contractors, keep making those blueprints a reality. We'll see you on the next one.